Bernie Wrightson, synonymous with the macabre, the masterful, and the unforgettable. From his humble beginnings to the creation of iconic characters like Swamp Thing, Bernie Wrightson's art has haunted and inspired generations. We'll delve into the shadows and light of his career, exploring the evolution of his breathtaking work from his first published pieces to his magnum opus, Frankenstein, and the poignant final strokes of his artistic journey. We'll examine what it takes to own a piece of his legendary comic book legacy, exploring the market value of his works and treasures remain within reach for collectors today. This is Creator Spotlight, Bernie Wrightson. Welcome to Creator Spotlight. This is by far the best segment of the night. This is the one I think most people are looking forward to. Our focus for today is on Bernie Wrightson. And what a career, dude. What a career.
Yeah, as usual, I ran my CLZ and cover price and just kind of pulled just his name. You can do that when you get into a cover that they've done. And it'll bring up all the covers you have. I don't have that many. I only have 14, but the ones that I have are like near and dear to my heart, as like most of them are series. I have the whole series, which we're going to talk about some of them, and the one standalone one too. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this because classic horror, as you know,
As
horror. I can't even do it.
It's horror. It's horror.
Right.
I can't help it. It comes out that way. I try. I do my best.
That's fine.
You know, it's character. It builds character.
The same thing on the East Coast of Canada. You say aunt.
Aunt.
But out here, you say aunt.
It depends. I could go either way. I usually say aunt.
Yeah.
I usually say aunt. Or titi. That's what I say because I say it in Spanish. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the man, the myth, the legend. Bernie Wrightson passed away in 2017, was a legendary comic book artist renowned for his intricate atmospheric horror illustrations. His detailed pen and ink style with masterful use of light and shadow brought chilling realism to his subject-defining horror comics in 1970s and beyond. He co-created Swamp Thing, a character synonymous with his art in House of Secret 92. His Swamp Thing series solidified his reputation. Wrightson also contributed in Warren's Creepy and Eerie, adapting classics like Poe's work. We'll talk more about that later. Beyond horror, Wrightson's tackled diverse projects, including Batman stories like The Cult and Nevermore, showcasing his versatility. He also illustrated Frankenstein, considered a masterpiece, and collaborated with Stephen King on projects like Creepshow and Cycle of the Werewolf. Wrightson's influence on comic art is immeasurable. See, now I can't even speak right. His evocative imagery includes to inspire. Explore his captivating work online by searching Bernie Wrightson's art or visiting fan sites dedicated to his art. When it comes to Bernie Wrightson, obviously he doesn't have a website, a proper website. So you can find his work throughout the internet. It's all over. It's plastered everywhere. If you do hashtag Bernie Wrightson art, you're going to find his art. And one of the things I would say about his art style is his penmanship is on a level that cannot be touched.
Yeah, like it's just, and we're going to get into a lot of the covers, especially the painted look is amazing. And when you get into the oversized books where he's really got more room, it's just amazing.
Yeah. And dare I say it, his work looks better black and white because he does this thing with the pen that a lot of people wouldn't even dare to do. You know, he was a master at cross hatching in a way that no one was able to do, and his style was very different to many others, and it fit the horror genre perfectly like a glove. So let's take a look at his work, starting with his first published work, and that's Creepy Number 9. This came out in 1966 from Warren Publishing. This book at a high sale of $15.60 at a 9.6. That was on October 16th of 2023. The last sale of this book was $99 at a 7.5, and that was in January. This book at a raw sells for $29. So, and by the way, these are the common figures. These are like the average. So when you average it out, this is what you're going to find it for the most part. Sometimes you can find it for more. Sometimes you find it for less, but this is the average. $29 at a fine for a raw, and $99 at a 7.5 because there really wasn't that many sold in graded. This is considered his first public sketch by Bernie Wrightson, published in the fan mail section, and it also featured a Frank Frazetta cover.
This is, I think, one of the most expensive first works that we've seen in the spotlight that I can remember anyway.
Yeah. Oh, trust me, we're going to go higher.
Yeah, I know.
But what's important about this is that this is not published paid art. It's published, of course, because it's in the fan mail. However, it is not. He wasn't paid for this art. He provided this as fan mail, and they put it out, and then eventually hired him.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I love that type of story.
Mm-hmm. Right. Next book is his first published work in comics, and that's House of Mystery 197. This book came out in 1969 for DC Comics. This book, $1,750 at a 9.2 was the highest sale of this book, and that was November 30th of 2024. The last sale of this book was $35 in very, very good condition. That was earlier in February. The raw goes for about $41, very good. 8.0 goes for about $450. This is his first interior art by Bernie Wrightson. It is a 3-page story written by Marv Wolfman entitled The Man Who Murdered Himself. What a title. Cover art is Neil Adams.
Yeah, another awesome book, cool cover, and expensive too.
Yeah, it's expensive at a 9.2, but not expensive in standard format. You get this at a raw for under $50. I think you got a gem.
Yeah, and I'm surprised with the pre-code horror being so popular that you don't see more of Wrightson's work getting a spotlight, because so much of it has that tone.
Yeah, but he's post-code.
Yeah.
So his stuff comes from afterwards. So good stuff there. Our next book is Legend Number 1. This came out in 1970. This is an indie title. I had to do some digging for this one. $75 is what I found it at Nearman. That was the highest sale, and that was January of this year. That is the last sale of the book. $50 it goes on average. These numbers are coming out of eBay. I tried searching for this book in other outlets like Cover Price and Go Collect. I couldn't find it, but I did find it on eBay, so therefore it counts. This is considered his first cover art. It's also interior art for The Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
This is a good one, and I love that cover. And again, that's not a bad price for a first work. Definitely looks like it's a magazine size.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a magazine size. It's look at that. If you look at that horse, man, that horse is vicious. Look at that face, almost like a wolf. That's how good he is, man. I would love to see this in black and white.
Yeah, I love those when they do that with all the absolute editions or the omnibuses where they show some of the pages where it's just the line art.
Because his line art is the best. Let's take a look at our next one. Chamber of Darkness #7. This came out in 1970 from Marvel Comics. A high sale of this book was $1,100 at a 9.8, and that was in November of 2018. The last sale of this book was $3, and that's at a no grade. It's also $11 at a very good grade, and $132 at 9.4 is the most common grade that we see. This is his first artwork for Marvel Comics.
I love you finding these because, again, $11, you can get his first work. I say it every time we talk about this, but this type of searching and finding artists' first work is kind of a little known or little pursued type of thing, but I love finding these books.
Yeah, and Chamber of Darkness, again, he's notorious for these titles. So you don't normally see him on the traditional superhero comics. He's done them, but not traditionally. He's usually on these horror books that, as of today, people are picking them up, more so. But Chamber of Darkness, it's not exactly a must-have title. Maybe for some. It's a very niche audience.
Yeah. And
you could have his very first Marvel comic for $11. Even though 9.8 at 1,000 isn't too bad. It's not too shabby. So let's go to our next book here. The big one. House of Secret 92. This came out in 1971 for DC Comics. A high sale of this book was $90,000 at a 9.8. That was September of 2021. The last sale of this book was $600 at a 1.8 in February 9th of 2025. You could get a raw copy at a very good at $798, which is the average, and 7.0 is the average for graded copies at $1,975. This is the first appearance of the Swamp Thing, Alex Olsen. Here's another important nugget. This is also his first DC cover.
Well, I mean, we should all pick it up just because of that then.
Yeah, I think I got a couple of $1,000 just laying around there somewhere. When I saw that this is his first DC cover, I was shocked. Yeah.
I mean, way to start with a bang.
Mm-hmm. His biggest bang too, right?
Yeah.
That's the point of this segment, so that you can hunt these books down and not overpay for them, really. But so Swamp Thing. Let's talk a little bit about Swamp Thing. During this exact same time, there was another character being formed, and his name was Man Thing. So, what's your thoughts on the two?
So it's interesting because a few years ago, I always try to, especially when the Marvel movies were really firing on all cylinders, before the Comic-Con came up, I always had a plan, like, what am I going to be looking for? And the one year before all of the hype of the Halloween show was coming out, I went after all the early Man Thing appearances and did some research on it, bought the omnibus. And it's interesting is that they shared a room, the two writers. I don't want to get anybody's name wrong, so I'll just leave it. Somebody in the comments will know, or you'll know. And they both had an idea for this and then went and did their own thing with it. And it's interesting. As a character, I definitely think Swamp Thing is a little bit better because Man Thing is very limited in your writing because it's written that he doesn't really think. He's more of a, just an emotion type thing. So, but I do like both characters, and we're going to see a little bit more of that later.
Yeah. With Man Thing, he has grown to be a different character than what Swamp Thing is. I think with Swamp Thing, starting with Bernie and Len Wein, and then, eventually getting to Alan Moore. Alan Moore did some things with Swamp Thing that, to this day, people are going to still talk about. And I think Swamp Thing is slightly more beloved than Man Thing.
Yeah.
And more iconic. They're both Swamp Thing and Man Thing are not the first of its kind as far as swampy characters go. There's a character called the Heap that predates them both. That's very similar to this. And if you go even further back, there's another character. I lost the name of that character, but it was one of those. It was one of those before Marvel timely comics where they would do, these prototype names or monsters, and there was a monster from the swamp that they created. So it exists. It's out there. But I think out of, Swamp Thing and Man Thing, I think though they were very similar when they first came out, they now went two different paths.
Yeah, for sure. And I really I don't know what issue it would be, and my Swamp Thing history is not the greatest, but when he became the green, right? I think that's really cool because I read Poison Ivy, and that's kind of a key part of that story. So that's always interesting to me too.
Yeah. All right. So House of Secret 92. Let's go to our next one. Our next one is DC 100-page Super Spectacular number 4. This came out in 1971 for DC Comics. An 8.0 sold for $4.25 at the highest sale. That was in November of 2024. This book last sold for $81 at a very good, and it's $52 raw is the average price, and $375 is for a 7.5. This is considered a classic Bernie Wrightson cover.
Yeah, I haven't seen this one before, but I can only imagine how difficult it is to get this in a good grade because of that cover.
Yeah, the blacks, and he does a lot of blacks. So when they do Bernie Wrightson's art, when they color it, there's so much black in the work. But it's a werewolf. Yeah, werewolf teabagging. These covers are just so classic for him. And I'm not going to go over all of them, of course, but this is one that's considered to be one of his top 10 of classic covers that don't really have any significant value other than they're considered iconic.
Yeah, it just looks great.
Okay. Our next book is House of Mystery 195. This came out in 1971 for DC Comics. The high of this book was $1,980 at a 9.8, and that was in November of 2024. The last time it sold was for $135 at a very fine, and that was in February. The raws are going for about $50 for very goods, $220 for an 8.5. This is a cover and interior art by Bernie Wrightson. Story title, Things Owed, Things Forgotten. Features a character similar to Swamp Thing and the Heap. So it's kind of like we're doing another Swamp Thing-like character here.
Yeah. Yeah, this one I don't recognize either, but obviously I love that cover. And again, with the black, right? Like being encircled in the wings, very cool.
Yeah, and I think this cover is, again, iconic. It's a cover I've seen. They've reprinted this book several times. So therefore, people gravitate towards it in that way. But it's a cover sale. And again, there's another swamp-like character in the story in there. So House of Mystery 195. Let's take a look at our next one. Batman 237. This is from 1971 for DC Comics. This book sold at a high at $4,600 at 9.8, and that was in May of 2024. Last time this book sold was on January 2025 for $39, and that was in a good condition. The raws are going for $66, and very good, while 9.0s is the average for it, and those go for about $358. This is a fun one, because this is the first appearance of the Reaper, Benjamin Gruen. It's an iconic horror cover and story concept inspired by Bernie Wrightson and Harlan Ellis. Features cameo appearances from Marvel characters like Havoc, Thor, Spider-Man, and Captain America as people in Halloween costumes. What's even more important is that real-life comic creators are drawn into the story. Bernie Wrightson, Jerry Conwell, and Alan Wise.
I love it when they do little inserts like that, especially being this old, like 1971, and the rivalry between Marvel and DC was still there. Issues like this are just fun, and that cover is amazing. So
yeah, keep note that this is actually a Neil Adams cover, and Bernie Wrightson did the interior work. But it's worth noting the significance of this book. This book, we talked about this book a few weeks ago when we talked about Neil Adams. So this is another one where Bernie Wrightson had his hand on this book too. And more importantly, he's in the book.
Yeah. His first appearance.
Yeah. Our next book is Weird Mystery Tales #1. This came out in 1972 for DC Comics. A high for this book was $392 at 9.6. That was recent. That was actually the beginning of the month. Last sale, this book was $17 at a very fine, and that was on the 9th of February. The raws are going for $24 at a very good. The graded copies are going for about $265 at a 9.2. This is the first appearance of Destiny, who is later incorporated into Neil Gaiman's Sandman series as one of the Endless. Very important character to the Sandman storyline.
Yeah, and again, you look at dollars you can pick up that for and have that character's first appearance before it kind of gets incorporated. Just a cool thing for sure.
And another thing is, being that we're having the Sandman series coming back from Netflix sometime in the summer, Destiny's in that series. So this book could go up in value because of that.
Yeah.
I personally love Destiny. I think Destiny is an amazing character. I love how he's created and what his purpose is. So personally, one of my favorites. If I see this book, I'm definitely picking it up.
Yeah.
Our next book is Swamp Thing #1. This is another iconic book. This is 1972 for DC Comics. A high sale of this book was $6,000 at 9.8, and that goes back all the way to November 2021. Since then, the last sale of this book was $300 at a 7.5, and that sold on February 9th of this year. The raws are going for $154 at a fine, while graded copies are going for $254 at an 8.5. The key significance: this features the first appearance and origin of the second Swamp Thing, Alex Holland, also cameo from Anton Arcane, first appearance of Matt Cable, who will later become Sandman's Raven. So Matthew the Raven is technically, this is his first appearance. First cameo appearance of the Unmen. First appearance of Nathan Ellery, the man who caused the explosion that created Swamp Thing. And this is, of course, the ongoing Swamp Thing solo series. Wow. That is a lot of first appearances.
Do you need another reason to possibly go buy this book?
Well, if you can't get House of Secret, this is the next best thing, is it?
Yeah.
What a difference, right? 90,000 versus 6,000.
Yeah. And, we talk about slabbing and raw all the time, and, $154 for a fine copy, but at 8.5 at 254, that's a respectable grade in my opinion.
$100 increase.
Yeah.
A book this old from the 70s, 72, the quality of the paper cannot be that great, because the way they were making comics at that time, that paper quality was bad. So
have they done a facsimile of this one?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it exists.
I'll have to look for it.
Yeah, it's definitely, and they've done multiple covers and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Next, Swamp Thing #7. This is another important book. It came out in 1973 for DC Comics. $1,000, $680 for 9.8, the high sale, and that was in August of 2022. Last sale was $10 at a very good. Fair market value of this book is at $45 fine, while 9.4s are going for about $191. This is the first meeting of Swamp Thing and Batman.
Some characters together just kind of are interesting and have good stories and kind of click. Mm-hmm. And Batman and Swamp Thing are one of those pairs, I personally think anyway. I love any kind of book that has them, even a tiniest panel together, because I don't read Swamp Thing, but when I was reading Batman and Detective, whenever they were together, I'm like, it was just cool.
There is something to say about Batman as a character, where he seems to work well with the supernatural, even though he himself is not a supernatural character. And I think that's what makes Batman so versatile in that way. There's so many other ways he's versatile, but his meetups with Swamp Things are really good. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They're really good. And this is one of those books where, though it's not super expensive, and you would consider this a minor key as compared to the other Swamp Thing books, but still, I think there's some significance to this book.
Yeah, I'm just going to go through all these presentations when I go to the Comic-Con and write down a list, and this is another one I'll be looking for.
Mm-hmm. And it's easy to grab, right? You see it, you know it, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, our next book is Swamp Thing number 9. This is 1973 for DC Comics. A high sale of this book is at $630 at 9.8, and that was recently July of 2024. Last sale of this book was $80 near mint. $22 for a fine copy. It's a fair market value. 9.6 goes for about $154. This is an iconic cover by Bernie Wrightson, but it's also his last cover of Swamp Thing.
Oh, interesting. A little, minor key thing there too.
Mm-hmm. And this cover, who doesn't know this cover? If you know Swamp Thing, this is the picture you see all the time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So good. So good.
I wonder did he ever sell any of his original art? Do you know?
It's a possibility. It's out there for sale now that he's no longer with us. So I don't know. I'm sure they're out there though. And
imagine the person that has this, if it's out there, this original art layout, that'd be amazing.
Yeah. And just like I said, how he spots blacks is something that is just masterful. And what's one thing about Bernie Wrightson's art is that he's also self-taught. For someone that's self-taught that knows art the way he does, that's very impressive.
Yeah.
Especially during that era. We're talking about the 70s where you didn't have the internet or anything like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Eerie 60, 1974 for Warren Publishing. This book at a high is at 185 and 9.6, and that was in October of 2023. Last sale of this book was $15 at a fine, and that was in January of this year. Raw copy goes for about $9 for a very good, while $57 at a 9.0. First cover art by Bernie Wrightson on Eerie. Here's what's important. He was doing work for Creepy and Eerie for Warren Publishing. It wasn't until issue 60 that he gets the cover. Now, I don't think most people know this cover well, but it is a Bernie Wrightson cover. And it took a long time before he actually gets to do the cover, especially with the people that was before him. So there was a lot of different artists before him. And he gets Eerie at this point.
That's a great cover. And again, the value is there for $15, even $57 for a 9.0. I mean, that's great price.
All right, moving on to our next book, Kong the Untamed number 1. This came out in 1975 for DC Comics. 9.8 sold for $450, and that was the high on April 2024. Last sale of this book was at $2 at a no grade. That's what that NG stands for. And raws are going for $6 fine. A graded copy of this book is at $50 at a 9.6. This is the first appearance of Kong the Untamed. I thought this was just a fun book to throw in there as a little, here's something for you.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a fan and you already have, House of Secrets and Swamp Thing 1 and you like them, I mean, why not try to find this? It's a very affordable book.
Mm-hmm. It's a cool cover too. Look at the anatomy on that character, that Tarzan-like character. This is what I'm talking about, how good of an artist he really is. I say is because you still look at his work in that way, even though he's no longer with us. All right, let's take a look at our next book, and that is Secrets of Haunted House. Number 5, 1975 for DC Comics. 9.2 went for $975, and that was January of this year. No grade copy sold for $28,000. That was the last known sale. Raw's going for $51 at a very good, and 8.0 goes for $214 graded. This is an iconic cover by
with
Bernie
the
Wrightson.
Black, like so much black in there.
It's a lot of black when you see a Bernie Wrightson cover.
Yeah.
But again, the shading, no one does it the same like him.
Yeah. The detail in the pumpkin is great.
Mm-hmm. And as well as the shadow of the pumpkin.
Yeah.
You see underneath it. It's like you don't see it at first, but then you see it. Genius. Pure genius. We defy you to unlock the shocking secrets of Haunted House. You gotta love those trade dress.
They gotta have so much stuff. Special Halloween shockers. And they have the title twice.
Let's take a look at our next book, and that is Incredible Hulk 197. This came out in 1975 for Marvel Comics. $650 at the 9.8 was the high sale. That was in December of 2024. The last sale of this book was $21 at a fine, and this book goes for about $10 at a very good. 9.6 goes for $347, and those are the average. This features cover art by Bernie Wrightson. Note, it's Man-Thing.
I have this book, and it's in my pile to go for grading in the shipment I'm going to send hopefully this week or next week. So we'll see. I might be able to show this off at some point.
So he goes to Marvel, right? He's been at Marvel before, but he's going back to Marvel, and they tell him, hey, you mind doing us a Man-Thing cover?
Yeah, you're so good on Swamp Thing. We have the same thing here. Do a Man-Thing cover.
And he's like, sure.
Again, like with the shading, like you're talking about, it's great on the characters there.
Mm-hmm. He's so good at it, man. He really is, man. Okay, let's take a look at our next book. Secrets of Haunted House 44. This book came out in 1981 for DC Comics. A high sale of this book is at $749 at a 9.8. That was last year. Tomorrow, as of tomorrow. That last sale of this book was at $208 at 9.4, and that was just on the 8th of this month. The raw is going for $4, very good, and $182 at a 9.4 for the graded copies. This is a very key, significant book, even though it features cover art by Bernie Wrightson. It also has a fan letter by Todd McFarlane.
Interesting. I'll have to try to find that so I can read it.
So just to see what Todd wrote, right?
Yeah, I'm curious if he talks about the art or if he talks about something else.
Yeah, well, who knows? And it's Haunted House, so who's to say what he's talking about? All right, our next book is Doctor Strange Silver Dagger #1. This one is weird to me because on the cover it says Doctor Strange Special Edition, but when you look it up, it's called Doctor Strange Silver Dagger #1. I don't know. I don't get it, but that's how it's listed as. It's from 1983 from Marvel Comics. A high sale of this book went for $179 at 9.4, and that was December of 2024. The last sale of this book was $6 at the near mint, as well as the fair market value of this book is $6. 9.4 goes for that $179. This is cover art by Bernie Wrightson. This is a rare Doctor Strange cover, but of course, it's definitely Bernie Wrightson.
Look at the detail of the background is awesome. It's so good. I haven't seen this cover before. It's amazing. I love it.
It's a wraparound.
Oh, even better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you want to find some Bernie Wrightson Doctor Strange, here's the book to look for.
Yeah, I'll have to remember too the title.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's Doctor Strange. It says Doctor Strange Special Edition, but it also is labeled as Doctor Strange Silver Dagger. So, good luck trying to find that one.
Yeah.
Here's a good one. Bernie Wrightson, Master of Macabre, #1. This book came out in 1983 for Pacific Comics. The high sale of this book is surprisingly $13 at a Raw, and that was in August 2021. The last sale of this book was $5 at a Very Fine, and that was in January of this month. And it sells for about $6, Very Fine, and there are no recorded slabs for sale. What's the significant? It features cover, story, and art by Bernie Wrightson. It includes reprints from Eerie and Creepy Comics. Note, it's Bernie without an E.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Totally different layout of the cover too.
Yeah. So what they ended up doing, Pacific Comics had the rights to a lot of Bernie's work, and they decided to do a lot of reprints for them. And of course, that's how this book came out. So this is really a collection of his work. And he did a lot of these. So I don't know how many issues are there in total, but there are quite a few issues, and this is issue #1. But look at the details here. If you just the way he does the eyes, again, that line work it's insane. The amount of line work he did in this time. Our next book, and that is the Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley's Frankenstein. This came out in 1983 from Marvel Comics. A high sale of this book was $3,000 raw. The last sale of this book was $74 at a fine. $90 is the average price of this book at a fine. There is a 9.4, but we don't have a recorded price for that 9.4. This is the creme of the creme. This is the book. If you are a Bernie Wrightson fan, this is the book you need to own, which is considered to be his masterpiece.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen this book in person before, so you have to keep an eye out for it.
This book was hard for me to find. However, it's on eBay. So you could find copies, and they go like about $90. So they sell pretty well. Even if you look at the image, I don't even have an image of the cover per se. But this is gorgeous. To the point that they approached him about coloring the work originally. And then when they looked at the work, they said, you shouldn't color this. That's how good the line work is, that you will actually lose beautiful artwork if you color it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Bert, this is his greatest work of art. Yeah. So go check. Like I said, go check it out. It's on eBay if you want a copy of it. You can pick it up for about $100 there. Mm-hmm. Next book is Heroes for Hope, starring the X-Men #1. This came out in 1985 from Marvel Comics. A high sale of this book is at $175 at a 9.8. Last sale of this book is $60 at an 8.5, and that was earlier this month. This book goes for about $5 fine and $135 for a 9.8. Bernie Wrightson contributed 3 haunting, beautiful pages, adding his distinct touches to this important project, raising awareness and funds for famine relief in Africa. I see this book all the time, and I may even have a copy of this book. I didn't even know Bernie did work in this book.
Yeah, me too. I've seen this book tons of times as well, and I had no idea that he did anything interior.
Yeah, I definitely should have it. To Alex's point on the chat, I do. I think I have it because it is a classic Arthur Adams cover, and Arthur Adams is my favorite artist, which we still haven't done a spotlight for Arthur Adams yet. We gotta do one soon.
Yeah,
but I'll probably pick every book for that one. That's why I'm intimidated by that one. Because he's my favorite artist. I can't tell you this is his best work because I think they're all great. This is a good book, man. It's a good book, good price. It has meaning behind it. It's hard to get it at a high grade because of the white page. We talk about black, but the white makes it hard because it gets dirty.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Let's go to our next book, and that is Marvel graphic novel 22, The Amazing Spider-Man, Hooky. This came out in 1986 for Marvel Comics. Has a high sale of $264 at a 9.8. I don't have a sales date for it. $8, no grade, sold in January. This book is $24 at a fine and $91 at a 9.8. This is a rare Bernie Wrightson Spider-Man story.
This book I bought when it was released, and I'm slightly annoyed about it right now because I went to grab it when I saw it was on this list, and I can't find it right now. So I'm hoping I didn't lend it to somebody and forgot. But
yeah,
my little 14-year-old brain, I love it. If you have not seen this book in person, it's a magazine size, and it has a bunch of double-page Bernie awesomeness in it that just is amazing. And it's a really great Spider-Man story too.
Yeah, it's one of those books where you don't hear many people talk about it.
No.
Yeah. And he didn't do that much Spider-Man. This is probably his only Spider-Man title that I know of. Because I didn't see any Spider-Man in his work. So
yeah, and it's just done so well. I can't say enough about this one. This is one of my favorites for sure.
Let's take a look at our next book here, and that is The Weird, #1. This came out in 1988 for DC Comics. High sale of this book is at $34 at an 8.0. That was all the way back in August of 2021. A no grade sold for $9 just recently. And near me, it goes for about $3. It's $20 at a 9.6. This is a Jim Starlin and Bernie Wrightson's creating a being of pure energy from another dimension, escapes his captors and seeks refuge on Earth, where he takes over the body of a deceased man and encounters Earth's superhero. What's important about this book, first of all, super cheap. Jim Starlin wrote it, so that's cool, right? You got the guy who, Infinity Gauntlet, right? Writer. But on the very first page of this book is Superman. And you get Bernie Wrightson doing a lot of DC superheroes. So I think this is an opportunity for him to do characters that he probably hasn't done before. He's done Batman, of course. We talked about that earlier, but he hasn't done the Justice League. And there's certain Justice League characters that he's never touched before that. This was the book that allowed him to do that.
Yeah, and this is another one that I picked up off the stands when it came out in 86 or 88. And I like the whole series. It's one of those ones that I actually should go back and reread just to revisit the art and the story again.
Yeah. It's a book that many people don't talk about. This is the first time I really heard about this book. You know?
I remember reading it and I liked it.
Speaking of Jim Starlin, Batman the Cult. This came out in 1988 for DC Comics. A high sale of this book was $223 at a 9.9, and that was in November of 2022. The last sale of this book is $6 as a fine. You could get that book near mint for $6, and a 9.8 goes for $55. This is the first appearance of Deacon Blackfire, but what's more important about this book, this is a Batman story done by Bernie Wrightson. This is his first proper Batman story.
And it's really good. If you haven't read The Cult, this is yet again another one I picked up when it came out. I still have my original copies from then. And I know that it's in a collection right now that's fairly new. It just came out probably in the last few months. And Izzy, I don't know if you've read this, but the art in this one is very fitting for the story. Like he changes his tone a bit because it's supposed to be kind of so hazy and, Batman's a little, been brainwashed almost, that you get that vibe from the art. Like it comes across really well.
It is a classic. It needs more love, my personal opinion. And this is the kind of story that I could see adapted to a film in some way. Obviously, you have to throw in some villains and stuff like that if it's going to be a film, but it lends so well. Really does.
I don't even know if they need to add anything because there's such a tendency now that it has to be, you're saving the whole universe. Whereas this is just, like he gets drawn into this and he has to kind of save himself.
Yeah.
And work his way out from and that's the battle in this story. It's not so much the battle between him and Deke. It's more of the battle of himself to like break his hold of him.
Yeah, agreed. Let's go to our next book here, and that is Punisher POV #1. This came out in 1991. A high sale, believe it or not, was $10, and that was in December 2024. The last sale of this book was $6 at a near mint. A fine goes for about $5. There's no recorded slabs. Key significance: this is the first Punisher story done by Bernie Wrightson. I promise you, this is not his last story.
I have never heard of this one, so this is another one I'll be looking for on Wednesday.
Yeah, I've heard of POV. A lot of people don't talk about it. It's done, but Starlin wrote it. So Bernie Wrightson and Jim Starlin, they collaborated quite a bit. I remember when this came out, and again, it doesn't have a lot of praises, but it's nice to note that he did a Punisher that wasn't a supernatural Punisher, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
Yeah.
This is old school Punisher, typical Punisher. Go check this one out. Our next book is Dark Horse Presents 100-2. Keep in mind, there's other versions of this book, but this book came out in 1995 for Dark Horse Comics. A high sale of this book was, really, believe it or not, $5 raw, and that was in 2019. The last recorded sale of this book was $3. This features a beautiful Bernie Wrightson cover of Hellboy, and it has a classic Hellboy story, Chain Coffin. Why is this book so undervalued?
I don't know. That's an awesome cover. Hellboy is a character that I really only know through the movies more than the comic. I remember the comic coming out when I was going to the store, but I never really bought it. But I love that cover, though.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's one of those covers that is like, why is this book not selling? Why?
Yeah.
$5, you can get this book for cover price. So go check it out. To Bernie Wrightson on Hellboy. So let's take a look at our next book here. Here's another Batman title that's worth noting. That's Batman Aliens #1. This came out in 1997 for DC Dark Horse Comics. The high sale of this book is $200 at 9.8, and that came out in April of 2022. The last sale of this book was $99 at a 9.8, and that was in January. Fair market value of this book is $8 at a very fine, while the graded copy goes for about $103 at 9.8. This is Batman Battling the Xenomorphs in a 2-issue limited series that was co-published by DC and Dark Horse. No, this is not Bernie's first Aliens drawing. He has a Dark Horse Comics presents with an alien, a xenomorph. So,
yeah, and I didn't know about this one either. So this I'll be looking for. I do have a lot of the Batman crossovers with other characters like this, but I didn't know about this one.
Yeah, I happen to have the one with the Predator.
Yeah, I have that one.
I have that one by the Kuberts. I don't have this one. I would like to have it because it is a Bernie Wrightson and it's written by Ron Mars. So Ron Mars is a great writer. So I would like to take a look at this one. It's 2 issues, so it's worth picking up.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, let's go to our next book. And that is Batman Nevermore #1. This came out in 2003 for DC Comics. A high sale is $18 at a raw, and that was in November 2023. Last sale of this book was $4 at a very fine. It's also the fair market value of the book, and there are no recorded slabs that were sold. This is a team of Batman and Edgar Allan Poe, which is quite fitting for Bernie Wrightson. And this is an Elseworlds story, of course.
Yeah, and look at the I love it because he got to do a little twist on Batman a little bit differently than he usually would, which would be fun to see.
Yeah, so if you look at it, it's kind of hard to see it because it's smaller, but it's like Batman as the Raven. So that's cool. And you know what? It makes sense with Bernie Wrightson doing an Edgar Allan Poe. He did a lot of Edgar Allan Poe stories prior. So why not just do an Elseworlds story featuring Batman in a Edgar Allan Poe story, which is, I think, is pretty cool. 5 issues. I don't know how much you were able to do with 5 issues, but
yeah.
It's a lot of Raven.
Yep.
But it's definitely worth checking out. I hope there's like a trade for this. That would be nice.
Yeah, I'd have to look at that.
Mm-hmm. So we're coming towards the end. We still have a few more to go. And here's one that I wanted to talk about. And that's the Punisher #1, the Marvel Knights Punisher #1. This came out in 1998 from Marvel Comics. A high sale of this book is at $76 at a 9.8 in January 2022. Last sale of this book is at $7 at a fine. And that's also the fair market value for this book. $76 is also the fair market value for a 9.8. This is Bernie Wrightson. Art brings a dark and supernatural edge to Marvel Comics' Punisher. Purgatory, that's the code name of the book, which deviates from typical Punisher stories by exploring the character's interaction with the supernatural. This, I'm sure on paper, this must have sounded awesome. Execution-wise, I'm sorry, it didn't work. Punisher does not need to be a supernatural Punisher. However, there's nothing wrong with Bernie Wrightson doing a Punisher book.
Yeah, and especially at that price. I'll look for this one too, because I'll be looking for the other one. And they did go into a supernatural direction later on with the character again.
This was at the time where Joe Quesada was brought into Marvel, and he wasn't the editor-in-chief, but he was the editor for the new Marvel's Knights line, which introduced us to Daredevil, Black Panther, Punisher, and the Inhumans. Those are the 4 books. And all of them went really well, except for this one.
Yeah.
This was the one that people went, what the hell? What the hell are you doing to Punisher?
Yeah.
Right? To the point that when they rebooted the series again, and they brought Garth Ennis with Steve Dillon, who's famous for Preacher at the time, he came into Punisher. They wanted to talk about this story because obviously Punisher's back from the dead. How did that happen? And the story was, I went to hell, I didn't like it, so they kicked me out, and now I'm back.
Yeah,
that was it. He summed it up in 1 page, Garth Ennis, when he wrote it. But I thought this was a cool moment in time of Punisher, and I had to throw it in there.
Yeah, I'll pick it up if I can find it for sure.
There's some great covers. Like, there are some really good covers. There's like this one cover of Punisher coming out of the grave, a la Last Craven, Craven the Last Hunt. Very similar to that. Not exactly, is at a different angle, but very similar to that. And it's worth checking out. It's definitely worth checking out. All right. And this is what we call the last major project. Frankenstein, Alive #1. This came out in 2014 for IDW. A high sale of this book is $9 raw, and that was in October of 2023. Last sale was that $9, and that's also the near value of this book. This is Bernie Wrightson's final major project, Frankenstein, Alive, a sequel to his acclaimed Frankenstein adaptation, stands an appointed testament to his artistic dedication, with Kelly Jones completing the artwork after Wrightson's passing. So he was never able to complete it, and Kelly Jones took over, which was, I have to say, that had to have been perfect. The perfect person to take over, because Kelly Jones embodies Bernie Wrightson's art style probably better than anyone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
What's your thoughts on this one?
Again, nice black cover. This is another one I haven't read, but for $9, I mean, I'm going to look for this book, or I'll just buy the whole series on eBay probably.
Yeah. Keep in mind, it's also written by Steve Niles, who does 30 Days of Night. He wrote the story, while it was illustrated by Bernie Wrightson, and then eventually Kelly Jones. So this is definitely a good book. It's worth having it. Again, if you are a Bernie Wrightson completist, this is definitely worth having. Okay. And that does it, guys. That was Creator Spotlight, Bernie Wrightson. I hope you enjoyed this retrospect as we look back at the history and comic books that Bernie left behind. A genius, legend, icon, you name it. He is by far one of the greatest artists of his time, and definitely in the 70s when he was at his peak. Go look up his work. Go check out his work. I hope this helps you out in finding books made by Bernie Wrightson. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more comic content. Check out these other videos for even more insight, and I'll see you at the next one. Excelsior.